There is a saying that goes something like, to know great joy is to know great pain. In other words, I think we need a contrast in order to better understand certain things. And film tackles that idea all the time, whether it's embracing life when you're faced with death, or loving someone all the more after you've lost them. And we see these types of contrasts everywhere, but one film that does it masterfully is Blade Runner 2049. It's a film that layers its contrasts in order to build bigger themes. Let's take, for example, the first two scenes of the movie. In our first scene, Agent K fights the large, intimidating Sapper Morton, taking a physical beating but coming out on top in the end. The lighting is dark and the score non-existent. In the scene that follows strikes a bold contrast. K is interrogated in a small, all-white room. His beating isn't physical, but it's verbal. And our score is now a high-pitched strain. K is inferior in this world. And it's an example of the first property of contrast in film, amplification. When two scenes are contrasted properly, their differences amplify the effect of each other. K's dominance is amplified by his submissiveness, and vice versa. We see visual and auditory contrast in order to amplify the one that's presented in the story. But in this case, our contrast is easy because the two scenes occur one right after another. So what happens when our scenes aren't so close together? Take, for example, the contrast in K's scenes with Joy. One takes place in the first act and the other in the final. Now when Joy first steps outside of their apartment, into the rain, it's a tender moment. K's never felt more close to her, even when he still believes that she's programmed to say certain things. And this is him knowing that great joy, knowing love. But then 2 hours later in the film, K and Joy meet again. But this time, the moment is brutal and sobering. She's still saying the same thing she said before, but K's never felt more distant and alone. And this is K knowing great pain, knowing loss. And that's another property of contrast, contextualization, using one scene to change how we feel or view another. See, the second time K sees Joy in the rain, he's lost all sense of his identity. He believed that Joy was sentient and understood and loved him, and now he's confronted with his worst fear, that none of it was real, just like his implanted memories. Not only has he lost his love, but he's lost the authenticity of that moment. And again, we get to see those visual and auditory contrasts. At first, K and Joy are equal heights, and the music is tender. But here, Joy towers over him, and the score's vanished. And it makes us think differently about the scene before. We question that authenticity, that tenderness. And we wonder, just like K does, was any of it real? This is yet another way to add impact through contrast. See, instead of purely amplifying the impact of a scene, we get to double it, to see it once and feel one way, but then to look back at it and feel differently. And now, all throughout the film, we see these contrasts. K's fear when he finds that horse is amplified because he showed no fear during that interrogation. We use shots of characters' hands throughout the movie to contrast their experiences and their motivations. And all of these things are building to perhaps the best contrast in the movie, the final two scenes. In the film's climax, we see every cinematic tool put to use. The score is bombastic, the cuts are quick, the acting is intense, the environment is brutal, waves are crashing down on our characters. And it's the picture-perfect climax to a film. But it's when the fighting is over that we get the contrast we've been building towards. See, as Kay and Deckard head back to Honest Aline's office, we see that every element of cinema we saw before is being contrasted. The score is now light and melodic. That darkness and harsh rain were traded for a calming light and a gentle snow. There's less movement, more dialogue, simpler cinematography. The final two scenes are a contrast in every way, and that amplifies their effect. The effects of war and peace. And it's Kay's final moments that recontextualize his journey from one about becoming human to one about redefining humanity. It's the brutality of love's death contrasted with the peace in Kay's. Blade Runner 2049 uses these contrasts throughout the film in order to create an experience that is, for me, endlessly rewatchable. Because every scene amplifies or recontextualizes another, adding more layers to the film for us to dissect. And Denis Villeneuve is able to use every aspect of filmmaking to bring those contrasts to full effect: the score, the cinematography, the performances. That's what great film allows us to do: revisit it over and over again, each time finding something new to love. And Blade Runner 2049 is ultimately a film about defining what makes a human experience, something that will change as we grow. And so it's a film that I can come back to time and time again, and every time find something new to love. So next time you watch your favorite film, look for those contrasts, whether it's the first and the last shots or a character's first and final words. Look for those moments of great joy and the pain that makes them all the more meaningful.
They all think it's about more detail, but that's not how memory works. We recall with our feelings. Anything real should be a mess.